This is a Quiet Loud Studios production, the podcast network where reflection meets amplification.
Hello, Athlete Mindset community. This is Lisa Bonta Sumii, the host of Athlete Mindset. Before we dive into this episode, I want to invite you to support the mission and purpose of our show. For $10 a month, you can help to make sure these conversations get to as many athletes, teams, coaches, and sport mental health environments as possible. As a subscriber, you will receive exclusive content and updates on current topics in athlete mental health, and you'll be directly contributing to the betterment of mental health for all athletes. Join the cause. Subscribe at sportse.io/athlete and make a difference today. Again, that's sportse.io/athlete. With your support and amplification, we can ensure more voices are heard and more individuals and communities are positively impacted. Welcome, everybody. Today on the Athlete Mindset podcast, we're in part 2 of our 3-part series with the True Athlete Project. Today, I have the honor and privilege of talking to Sam Parfitt. He is the CEO and founder of the True Athlete Project and a global leader in social impact through sport. He's a former NCAA Division I tennis player, a coach, and mindfulness teacher with a master's in science and sport policy management and international development from the University of Edinburgh. We're going to get into a little bit more about who he is and how he does his thing. But for now, just say hello and welcome, Sam.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
No, I'm excited. So you do a lot of amazing things and you've pulled from your own experience, positive and negative, per your own words. What is it about mindfulness that is kind of your area of expertise and that you've developed a passion for?
Yeah, so I had a roller coaster when I was an athlete, really saw kind of the best and worst of sport. And it really stuck with me. Like, how can that kid growing up loving tennis, hitting a tennis ball against the back garden wall hour after hour, just loving it, how does that very pure, joyful thing become something very kind of cold and destructive and harmful? And I was seeing that not just for me, but friends at other colleges, elite athletes in the media. I did a lot of work with at-risk youth, where even their experience, which should have been about the really kind of joyful, freeing, meaningful aspects of sport, was very much kind of stolen, taken away by kind of fairly old school methods that just weren't about being skillful, about how you can develop through sport. And so all of that was sort of welling up in me, like, this isn't good enough. So how do you design sports programs that can improve performance, can nurture mental well-being, and can create a more compassionate culture of sport, a more compassionate society? And so by wanting to kind of do those 3 things, it became more and more obvious to me that mindfulness practices were part of the answer, at least for their ability to do the performance piece, the well-being piece, and that larger kind of compassionate society piece as well.
I love it. That compassionate society piece is part of my heart and my passion too. So I think it's rare, in my opinion, that is included in the conversation. And so I appreciate that you are doing that. I think I have so many questions, obviously, but this piece about cold, destructive, and harmful, that's deep, sort of. I mean, those words are very poignant, and I think people are, I don't know, I want to say afraid to describe it that way, but that's real. What have you seen, whether in your own experience or your other athletes, that would fall into that sort of category of negative experience as described in those words?
There are lots of quite harrowing stories of athletes taking their own lives, being close to it, having experiences where they are bullied, abused, and some of it sort of stands out as clearly being awful. And then there's a whole chunk of it that doesn't stand out because it's kind of viewed as normal and sort of accepted. And so if you sort of extrapolate that out to just how much sport is happening, where we're not really challenging how great it is, when we know that it can be awesome, there's a big gap there between sport's actual potential and its realized potential. Big gap. And so I think there's a lot of work to do. And it's very common. I started TAP because of my own story, but it's the True Athlete Project. TAP has resonated and grown with so many athletes who have obviously their own unique stories, but very similar stories of feeling like sport maybe wasn't a place where they could be their true self, where they just weren't given the support that matched the challenge of being an athlete. If we're going to demand a lot psychologically, physiologically, in all sorts of ways as a young athlete, like the support has to match that challenge. So it's not saying that the challenge is bad. Challenge is fine, but the support needs to live up to that challenge.
No, I love it. I love it. I love it. Because we're just told, we tell the athletes, certain folks, just do it. Just grind it out. Just put your head down, do it. Play through the pain, play through the mental health challenge, play through whatever's going on at home. I don't really care. Like, just do it. Right. And so, first of all, it's not compassionate. Second of all, it's like, well, how would I even do that? Like, there's an assumption that the young athlete knows what that is and that there's no skill building or like education or information about how to do that.
Yeah, that's great. That really speaks to the heart of our approach. So we talk about holistic athlete development to mean that when a young person is in front of you and you're coaching them, everything going on in their lives is relevant to that interaction, to that moment. We don't need to create a space where you just leave that at the door and compartmentalize. Bring all of it. Like, we can start from there so that we're helping in a realistic way rather than something that's just kind of separate off to the side. And you find that it's a much more meaningful, fulfilling, rich experience for the athlete, but also for the coach. And clearly, in our experience, has no cost to performance. When someone feels like they can value themselves beyond the winning and losing, suddenly they're freed up. They play with less tension in their body,
right?
Performance anxiety.
Yep.
So there's, the benefits are logical, but there is this sort of momentum in the culture, sort of the way that things have always been done, and sort of the schemas that we build up that we just have to break down. Like, so discipline, people think that there's a sort of spectrum, discipline on the one hand, compassion and softness on the other hand, and they're not opposites. Like, they can interact. A more compassionate approach can help you to be more disciplined. Discipline itself can help you to be compassionate. So we have to break down some of those kind of old schemas, I think.
For sure. That they can, these concepts you're talking about can coexist together and actually enforce and help and edify the other aspects. It's not mutually exclusive. They have to be together, just like the human who is the athlete who is the human. That's not separate, right? Like, we have to include the whole experience. And then I think in my experience, I've seen that athletes then are sort of feel more valued and seen, that they are people, not just object trying to help you get your goals done as a coach or an institution, league, whatever. So I love it. I think part of this dispelling is, well, okay, Sam does this thing with TAP. Let's break it down. How do you define mindfulness for those who might be like, what is it really? Is it like some woo-woo stuff? Like, how do you define mindfulness and apply it in TAP?
Yeah. I had a coach at a governing body, a national team, when I introduced mindfulness, say, yeah, that's crystals, isn't it? I was like, oh, no, it's not.
Right.
So the definition I like best is, I think, by the Mindfulness Initiative, maintaining a moment-by-moment awareness of our thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations, and surrounding environment through a gentle and nurturing lens. So there are lots and lots of quotes or definitions out there. Some get quite complex. That one I really like, but what you see across many of the kind of well-used definitions is that there are two component parts. So there's the present moment awareness, being aware of what's happening now, paying attention to what's happening now, but paying attention in a particular way. So this idea of a gentle and nurturing lens is really important. So those two bits work together. And so when we're kind, gentle, soft about this experience, we can pause that judgment that's happening, pause the
Correct, right.
story that's running.
Mhm.
We can connect with what's really true right now. And by starting at what's true right now, we can then move forward with more choice, more freedom about actually, okay, what's the best next thing for me to do? What's the wisest, healthiest thing for me to do in this situation? And that's where mindfulness has all sorts of wonderful benefits in relation to how you interact with a family member, how you respond to the road rage happening around you. So it, as well as obviously in the moment, in sport competition, in training.
For sure. Again, addressing the human being who happens to be an athlete, who happens to wear the jersey, right? But also has a life outside of their sport. But I think, what if and I've gotten this a lot. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. When not only mindfulness, but even the sports psychology piece, people say, yeah, crystals, or this is some hippie stuff, or like, but you and I both know that it's grounded in neuroscience, it's grounded in research, evidence-based practices, things like that. But how do you address the sort of old school coach who's like, that's not for me. I don't believe in that. That's like, I don't want my players to get soft, or like, I don't want to have to baby them. And then then they make excuses about getting on the field or whatever competition environment. How do
Yeah.
you address something like that?
Yeah. So a few things come to mind. Some of it very practically when we're working in those environments is our relationship building with those kind of key people with influence in the environment. Like literally, how do you build a personal relationship with them so they see that, like,
Love it.
maybe in their words, that I'm not just some like meditating, tennis playing British hippie. Maybe I've got something useful to offer. I think it's helpful that a lot of our team are high-level athletes, so it's clear that we also understand how to work hard and commit to everything involved in being an athlete. Some of it is in the language. Sometimes there's language that can be a bit of a midpoint. So, for example, if we're talking about forgiveness and self-compassion on the one hand, they want to be talking about grit on the other hand. Is there a middle language like resilience? And actually, the two can kind of come together, and we can look at an ecological approach to resilience and then kind of expand what it means. And so there's a bit of that. Mindfulness is a difficult word, actually. It creates some challenges. But so I think as much as possible, engaging people in practices. And sometimes you see coaches step back and they let the athletes do the practice. Sometimes you get coaches who come in and join in. Great if they join in kind of in that environment and embrace it, close their eyes, be vulnerable. And because pretty quickly, when you engage people in the practice itself, they get it. And they get what's just happened to the environment. When they open their eyes, they get what's happening in their body. It's a pretty quick, even though it's long-term work, it's actually quite a quick sort of sensory experience.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'd say those are the kind of the main things. Shaping, there's a little bit of marketing in there. Like, how do you, like, literally, what do you title the sessions? So
For sure.
did a workshop on suffering, which is it was a group of athletes who the coach sort of thought they might be quite resistant, kind of 16, 17-year-old male athletes. And he was a bit worried. So we framed it as a session on suffering, which is very true to mindfulness practices, to
For sure.
philosophical underpinnings of mindfulness, and yet really worked in that kind of gritty athlete way. And so that's part of it too.
No, I think how you like find the words and, like you said, marketing or like approach that already fits within the culture of that age group or that team, or I think is really important. I've had to also do that. So I think that we have to do the work to present it in a way that is palpable and understood, because it's already kind of something to explain, so to speak. But if the actual sort of cover of it is, oh, okay, I want to learn about suffering. Dang, what's that? Like, I don't want to suffer. Like, is kind of cool. I think what I find too is like mental fitness, like developing, we develop physical fitness all the time, conditioning, strength, and everything. But the mental aspect of the game, this is part of mental fitness training to, know about mindfulness, to know how to practice it and train the brain with it, just like anything else. So I think that's really big and such a good point, how to talk about it, how to explain it, what is the first thing they think about so that they're open,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's huge.
Yeah. We had a lovely quote. I won't remember the whole quote, but it was she's a speed skater who we worked with. She was on one of our athlete mentoring programs. And she said something like, I learned how to train for intense moments without training intensely. So she really got the sort of this subtlety to mental training that doesn't feel the same as the burn on a bicep when you're doing a bicep curl. But figured out that it was still this difficult training, even though there was a sort of softness and a flexibility to it. I thought it was a great quote.
I agree. I love that one. Speaking of the mindfulness, if we take it a little bit deeper now, what are some of the techniques? Because we know mindfulness is an umbrella, right, for lots of different approaches and techniques. But what are like maybe two of your favorite mindfulness techniques that you use with the folks that you work with, like you or your team, that you guys really like? I know it's your specialty, so like whatever you want to share, I think would be awesome.
Cool. Yeah. Well, with all of our practices, we try to show, okay, this is a practice you can use. So it's a tool, but we're learning a skill here that is then applicable to whatever comes your way in life. So there's always that kind of component to how we teach them. I suppose the mindful walk comes to mind because that is a really nice practice for helping people bridge the gap between a sort of traditional seated meditation where you're paying attention to some anchors that are pretty sort of steady, bridges the gap between that and kind of a real life training competition because it adds the movement in. So although it's a practice unto itself, you're paying attention to the sensation of every single step. And when your mind wanders away, you come back, building that ability to come back. It's also, just helping to show how mindfulness practice can kind of grow into something very dynamic. And obviously, as you take that further, being mindful becomes even harder. You start taking it into, can you be calm and compassionate and present even when you're at 6-all in the third set tiebreak and the coach is screaming and your parents are in the stands and the social media post that's going to come out about the match, like, what? So I think starting to introduce some of that dynamism into the practice is nice, and athletes tend to like practices that are incorporating kind of their body as the anchor. So
yes.
And I really like doing a body scan meditation. That would be the other one that comes to mind, which is quite a simple meditation. Typically, we'll lie down on our backs. We will usually do it after a training, and there's a really nice kind of yin yang effect. To sort of, there's the fire and the surge of the training, and then this very contrasting experience of maybe we turn the lights out, everyone's lying down, often people will fall asleep, which is fine. Some mindfulness teachers don't like it if that happens, but I think it's fine. And again, there's a lot happening in that experience. If you're to analyze it, the person might just feel like they've had this very relaxing time, but actually there's a lot that's happening. There's the ability to pay attention and to be accepting of our bodies, how our bodies feel. It's training interoception, so literally the ability to feel kind of what's happening inside our body, which has a lot of relationship then with injury prevention. It does a lot for the whole environment. It's quite a vulnerable act to all be doing that as a team or as a group.
For sure.
Kind of unusual. So these practices do a lot more than just sort of what they might seem like on the face of it. There's quite a lot that's happening there. And quite quickly, you see the change in the environment. We had the start of a partnership with a sport here in the UK, British fencing, and started the camp and did some of these practices. And I think that this idea of doing these types of practices in a dynamic sporting setting that's normally so kind of about the competition and noisy, and there was something that just did to the environment, where we found in the first weekend I had like maybe 8 kids come up to me for mental health support conversations. They'd never seen that before at a training camp. There was just something that it unlocked in the athlete's idea of what the space was about. It's about all of me.
No, that's fantastic. Like almost a permission to like kind of be in your bodies in that way, in more of a, we keep saying soft, but like more of a fluid, less restricted, flowy, free way that can coexist. Like people are always like, oh, how can I have fun and like have the beast released to like get it done? I'm like, well, you can. It's both and. It's not exclusive.
Yeah.
You better have fun releasing that beast. You know, it's both, but like dedicated time to nurture both and everything else in between. So that's fantastic. I mean, I think the body scan is one of my favorites. I think we could like do a whole nother hour and a half, 2-hour podcast, or at least discussion, me and you, about the body scan. But I love, again, the connection to inside the player, the coach-player relationship, and then the environment, the compassionate environment that you are nurturing and building for them. Let us talk about the True Athlete Project. This is your company, your project. You have a lot of amazing human beings in the project that I've had the honor of meeting and speaking with. Tell us like the main philosophy and mission of the True Athlete Project, and then how people can support it, because I know once people listen, they're going to want to be a part of it and support in any way they can.
That's amazing. Thank you. Yeah. Well, so we're a registered charity in the US and the UK, but with international programs, actually. And our mission is to build a more compassionate world through sport. So we want to see sports organizations truly serve individuals and society. We want to see coaches becoming really skilled and supported at nurturing the holistic, long-term development of every single person they serve. And we want to see children, young people, athletes from all walks of life who have joyful, meaningful experiences of sport, and because that's going to nurture their well-being and hopefully create this world of true athletes who want to give back and pass that on to others. So that takes lots of different forms: mentoring programs, athlete for social change training, mindfulness workshops, classes and workshops for teams and clubs. It's, very, very exciting to see how it's grown. We've got lots of partnerships with international federations and national teams and colleges and high schools. And the team are incredible. Yeah, I'm really just so lucky. So I'd love people to reach out if our work is of interest. They can email me, sam.parfitt@thetrueathleteproject.org. They can follow us on Instagram. Just search The True Athlete Project and they'll get there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we will have all your contact information in our show notes when we produce and publish this episode and the other 2 episodes that are part of this 3-part series. You know, myself, Sportsy Media, and Ath Mindset, my company, are super excited to just lend an opportunity for people to know here in the US what's happening, that you've already established so many relationships and done a lot of things in the UK and beyond. Now let's bring it to the US a little bit more deeper. Yeah. So I'm excited. Thank you. I know you're a busy guy, for taking the time. And I just appreciate our conversation very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a real honor to be on. And I can't wait to figure out how we'll collaborate and take this approach further. Thank you so much.
This podcast exists because of the team at CAS-CM. CAS-CM is a B2B content production company helping organizations create and share their stories. We aim to create space where businesses can build assets and drive revenue through writing and talking. Content creation should be enjoyable and accessible. At CAS-CM, we love helping make that happen. Learn more at cascm.com.